So this video is a lot like the last video, but now we are talking about angles instead of segments. So we're going to learn all about the angle addition postulate this time around. But first we need to go over some vocabulary. Never mind, no we don't. So the angle addition postulate is again part plus part equals whole. We're just talking about angles. Okay, so we've got measure of angle PDQ. We never had vocabulary that talked about angles, did we? And we've got the measure, so the M is the measure of, and the measure, let me do another letter, another color. So the measure of angle QDA, okay, is equal to the measure of angle PDA. Excuse me, the whole thing. So the important part in angles, and it's harder to figure out in angles, is knowing what's a part and what's a whole. Okay? So let's talk about this. So if the measure of, oops, that should have an angle, angle PDQ. So PDQ. So with your pencil or whatever, think PDQ. So if that's 89, write your measure in there, in that angle. Okay? And then the measure, that should have angle too, of angle QDA. So QDA, whoops, QDA is 25 degrees. Okay? We want to know what's the measure of angle PDA. Well, PDA is the whole thing, right? So remember, part plus part equals whole. So 89 plus 25 is going to equal our whole, and that is going to equal 114. Let me just use my handy-dandy calculator to be sure. Yes, 114 degrees, of course. It, of course, gets a little bit more complicated. So if the measure of IJA, so IJA, whoops, is 34, and again, take the time to draw the picture and write your measurements in there. It gets a whole lot easier when we get to X's, okay? I mean, it makes it easier when we get to X's. And AJK, so that part is 110. We want to know what is IJK, the whole thing. So again, 110 plus 34 is 144. So when you're doing these problems, I want to see this as your work. If you don't write that out, I'm good with that. But this is your work, is drawing that angle. Those angles, I should say. So here we start having X's, okay? So this is where it really starts to matter that you write it in there. So IJZ, so IJZ is 11x minus 1. IJK, so the whole thing is 162. And then ZJK is 44x minus 2. So again, part, the 44x minus 2, plus part, plus 11x minus 1, is equal to the whole, which is 162. And then we solve for x. We've got two x terms, two constants, so we can combine those like terms. 44x plus 11x is going to give us 55x. Negative 2 minus 1, so we're getting more negatives, so minus 3 equals 162. Add that 3 to both sides, and 55x equals 165. Again, I'm going to take my handy-dandy calculator. and x equals, oops, we're dividing by 555, I didn't write that down, sorry, and x equals 3. And that's all we're doing is finding x. Okay, be careful because sometimes it'll say find one of the measures, and so you'd have to put that 3 back in, but we're not doing that at this point. So a little bit more vocabulary. So an angle bisector is a ray that divides an angle into two congruent angles. Okay, so anytime you see the word bisector, you're making two congruent things. This is an angle bisector, so you're making two congruent angles. And the way we mark that is we have these curvy lines in there. Okay, we both give them both one line like that, and so that means that this angle is congruent to this angle. We use this symbol congruent. Okay, equal sign with a squiggly line over it is congruent. Absolutely, you need to be able to know that without hesitation from this point on. This means congruent, which means equal. So it tells us that QS bisects angle PQR. So we have a ray QS that bisects this angle. So let's draw PQR, okay? And we have a ray that starts at Q and it bisects this angle. So that means it goes up like this, and that gives us S. So it starts at Q, right? And it bisects. So that means that this angle is congruent to this angle. And then it tells us that the measure of angle PQS is 24. So PQS is 24. And we need to find PQR, okay? Angle of P. So we need to find the whole thing, okay? So there's a couple things going on here. We know it bisects, and we know that this is congruent to this. So that means that if this angle is 24, then this angle is 24, okay? But it wants to know the whole thing, so we have to now use that angle addition postulate and say, well, part plus part equals whole, so 24 plus 24 equals 48. I'm not going to do this one. I want to do another one like this, because the problem is students tend to want this number to always be the whole, but it's not always. Sometimes that they give you a constant number like that and it's one of the parts, okay? So be very careful with that. Please ask questions if you have them.